Welcome to the Poetry Pea and to this, our latest podcast on one-line haiku and senryu. Writing a successful one-line poem is one of the trickiest things we've asked you to do. On the surface, it looks deceptively simple. After all, it's just one line. But anyone who has seriously attempted it knows that a good one-liner demands just as much precision, balance, surprise and resonance as a three-line poem, possibly even more. Every word really has to earn its place, and there is nowhere, absolutely nowhere, for a weak phrase to hide. And that was certainly illustrated by this round of submissions. I don't want that to discourage anyone from sending work to Poetry Pea. Quite the opposite. I hope we're a friendly gateway for poets. A place where people can begin their publishing journey before going on to appear in journals all over the world. But we also have a responsibility to be an aspirational publication. We want poets to feel genuinely proud when their work appears here. And that means publishing poems with real merit. And so I'm going to be honest with you. We rejected a very, very high percentage of submissions this time. Not because the poems lacked promise, far from it, but because one-line haiku and senryu ask an extraordinary amount of both the poet and the reader. I think it's fair to say that, as a community, we've all got a little more work to do on our one-liners, myself included. And that's an exciting challenge and opportunity. So I thank everyone who submitted their work. It takes courage to send poems out into the world, I know that, and every submission is appreciated. Congratulations to all those whose poem was accepted for this podcast. And, of course, the journal. A heartfelt thank you also goes to the editing team, Liam, Robert, Vandana and Lev, for the care and attention they gave every submission. My thanks too to our judging panel, Clive Grewcock, Lee Hudspeth, Johnny Moran and David Green, who generously gave their time and expertise to help the selected poems you'll hear today. And a special thank you to Lev Hart, who not only edited, but contributed some thoughtful commentary on one-line poems, particularly on what made this round's successful submissions so effective. So then, enough from me. Let's hear some poetry. Clive, welcome back to the podcast. For those of you who don't know Clive, perhaps you'll know this poem because it's one of my favourites of the year so far, and I think I've told everybody that. And as we've got you here, Clive, do you think you can read it for us?
I'd be delighted to, and I'm delighted to join you once again. Dry wind, the grass, bending to the north. Dry wind, the grass, bending to the north.
Lovely. And it's lovely to see you in the judge's seat again. So with that in mind, which poem have you chosen this time and why?
The one-line poem I've chosen this time round is by John S. Green. Chapter after chapter, reheating my tea. Chapter after chapter, reheating my tea, by John S. Green. This is a delightful moment captured in one short line, in this case, 6 words. What makes Green's haiku more appealing is the fact that it is constructed with 2 repeats within that single line. We are on a cycle of interest, chapter after chapter, and that tea gets a second or third or fourth heating Green has harnessed the depth of haiku in his one line. Chapter can relate to a book where the writer is enthralled and their tea is in need of reviving. Alternatively, the writer can be listening to someone telling a tale, chapter after chapter, and the need to heat that tea once again. Perhaps Green is bending someone's ear. To be more existential, my tea could be taken as the essence of Green's life, and each twist and turn is chapter after chapter, and keeps that essence topped up. Alternatively, things never change, the world keeps spinning. Green has used this one line in a traditional manner, not a word out of place, and I can sense the delight of choice to complete these 6 words. What about punctuation? Unnecessary, and their use would add an element of complication. There is an ebb and flow to the structure, thanks to the syllables 2, 2, 2, 3, 1, 1. Green has skillfully put a pace into his haiku. There is a repetitive feel to the 2 syllables, chapter after chapter. The lengthier 3 syllables of reheating and coming to an end with the importance of my tea. Green has used a great skill to create so much within this one-line form. I suspect it is a moment of simplicity and contemplation, and all the different avenues we attribute enhance the piece. There is so much to unpick in such a short poem. The wonderful thing is, this unpicking is done smoothly as we flow across the line, and we can enjoy the piece as it settles, like a palatable tea. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Clive, this is a bit unfair, but as we record this a little bit early, you haven't had a chance to listen to my podcast on traditional haiku, in which I ask, is there such a thing, or should we just be talking in terms of haiku, senryu, and short poems? I mean, I've done it before, but I go into a little bit more depth this time. So I'd like to ask you what you mean when you say traditional, when you say Green has composed this one line in a traditional manner.
Well, when I commented on that, I saw it as being traditional in a short form Japanese style, in that we're not trying to over-explain, keeping things to the point. To me, that traditional style is, it lingers afterwards. So it's not over-explaining, and it's being quite precise with the choice of words.
Okay. You've actually opened up more things I could have talked about in my traditional podcast. Thank you. That's I feel another one coming on. And Lev Hart, one of the team here at Poetry Pea, one of the editing team, says this particular poem reminds him of the legend of Sisyphus, you know, the chap who was condemned to push a boulder up a mountain only to see it roll down every time, which I suppose is fair enough in some ways. Although I have to say, reading a book and letting your tea go cold is much more pleasurable than pushing a boulder up a mountain and seeing it roll back down the hill. Did that occur to you as you were reading it at all?
The legend of Sisyphus, it didn't, but it's that repetitive chapter after chapter. And to me, even though there's only 3 words in chapter after chapter, it's only a small section, so it could be, it's chapter after chapter after, it's a continual thing. So the idea links in very nicely.
Yeah. I don't know, for me, sometimes it takes something like this, listening to you making a commentary, or somebody like Lev sending me an email and saying, oh, did you notice? And it just brings another dimension to the poem.
And I think as well, that's where I mention it's the world keeps spinning. That chapter, it might be as simple as it being engrossed in the book, but I think there's much more to it than that.
Yeah.
And the story just keeps going round and round.
Yeah. I think that's where I see it tying in. You're right. Absolutely. So, brilliant, as always, Clive. Thank you very, very much. Greening leaves inside a crowded hospice. Greening leaves inside a crowded hospice. Shika A. Summer dawn, a small garden spider spins the day. Summer dawn, a small garden spider spins the day. Susan Andrews. Not water, under the bridge, refugees. Not water under the bridge, refugees. Cynthia Anderson. In the world of one colour, sun and clouds indiscernible. In the world of one colour, sun and clouds indiscernible. Emile Carla. Giving a spot in the garden, our word. Giving a spot in the garden, our word. Peter Jastrzemski. Salted licorice, sharing her World War stories. Salted licorice sharing her World War stories. Adele Gallagly. Family circle, the loose lug nut. Family circle, the loose lug nut. Steve Barr. Frosted window, the splinters of starlight. Frosted window, the splinters of starlight. Gavin Austin. Through the valley of the shadow, nightingale. Through the valley of the shadow, nightingale. Deborah A. Bennett. Birdsong, for only a moment, the sky's blue. Birdsong, for only a moment, the sky's blue. Rowan Beckett Minor. Wild roses, each raindrop a deepening shade of red. Wild roses, each raindrop a deepening shade of red. Jill Mura. As I enter the marsh enters me. As I enter the marsh enters me. Michael Muller. Next up, our second commentary of the day. Our next judge is Lee Hudspeth, himself a Poetry Pea Prize winner. Lee and Joan Fingan wrote the editor's choice split sequence dichotomy in the very first issue of Split Peas, our journal of split sequences, back in 2024. But this is the first opportunity I've had to say congratulations in person. So congratulations, Lee and Joan, obviously. And in your case, welcome to the podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Patricia.
It's a pleasure to have you. So now, Lee, we've established your credentials. We've bigged you up. It's time for you to shine again. Which poem have you chosen to nominate and why?
This poem is by Stephanie Zeffirelli, Taking Their Time, the Shape of Mountains. Taking their time, the shape of mountains. And I was drawn to the poem primarily because it has so many juxtapositions and layers, and it's just a massive poem in 7 words. I guess it's that attraction I have to juxtaposition and scale. Mountains exist on a grand geological scale. For example, the Swiss Alps, as we see them today, are approximately 45 million years old. Such an enormous swath of time is implied by this thought-provoking monocle. Compared to the typical lifespan of the human being, this poem suggests the staggering juxtaposition between human time and that of some features of the natural world, in this case, mountains. Digging deeper, a chain of approximately 600,000 human lifespans, end to end, would be needed to stretch back to the origin of the Alps. By explicitly referring to, quote, the shape, unquote, of mountains, instead of using just the noun mountains, Zeffirelli expands the poem's perspective, allowing us to imagine the forces of wind, snow, and rain erosion that have shaped these mammoth structures over millions of years, and that continue shaping them to this day. Considering where one might hear a pause in this monocle, it certainly could be as follows: taking their time, the shape of mountains. However, reading the poem aloud in one breath with no pauses seems to best match the steady, continuous, and inexorable processes that mountains are subjected to, being thrust up from the Earth's crust when created, and then being affected by slow but constant erosion. The expression taking their time is most often associated with people who are perhaps a tad late to a party or slow to get their shoes on before school. And Zeffirelli's use of this phrase subtly and cleverly anthropomorphizes mountains within the context of time scales, as well as the scale of size. Mount Everest is 29,000 feet tall, whereas a human is a bit under 6 feet tall. And here again, the poem nudges us to grasp the enormity of these different scales. There is much to dwell on in this inventive, compact, yet monumental poem. Bravo, Stephanie.
Yes, there is a lot to think about. And thank you for mentioning my beloved mountains here in Switzerland. Have you ever been?
I have not, but it's on the bucket list.
You also took me back to my my geography lessons at school and how the mountains were formed. As you were talking, I was just thinking of the Lauterbrunnen Valley, which is very dear to me. It's in the Bernese Oberland. If you look at those mountains, you can see where they've been thrust up, as I think you put it, thrust up from the Earth's core. And then, of course, they've been eroded, maybe not initially, but they were eroded by glaciation. So you have the beautiful
U-shaped valleys and so on. And you're right, or Stephanie's right, I guess, taking their time, the shape of mountains. I've never really thought about that. But the other thing I wanted to say to you, and I have to bring it up because I can hear all the people I've sent emails to shouting at me now. Anthropomorphism. I am notorious for taking the view that I don't think it belongs in a haiku. I think it's a no-no. On the other hand, I'm willing to rethink because I don't think I've delved enough into history and, all the ins and outs of it in enough detail to be definitively against it. So obviously that's two commentaries and two new topics. But I wonder, Lee, you don't have a problem. Do you have anything to start the topic off when I start researching?
Sure, I think there's a spectrum. Here one could read the poem and perhaps not attribute human qualities to mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's certainly possible. I'm one reader, and that came very much subtly to me.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, if there's a spectrum of subtle to moderate to egregiously obvious, I would say that Stephanie has tiptoed very carefully around that heuristic, to her credit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. So I should look at spectrums. I think you might have a point there. You might have a point there. Jolly good. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
If you have any thoughts later, do send me an email. It's given me, as Clive did, it's given me more to think about with the poem. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you.
Well now, off air, Lee threw a little spanner in the works after the judging had officially finished. So, during our post-commentary discussions, Lee championed another poem and persuaded us it deserved to be brought into the nominations. Obviously, he didn't have a commentary ready at the time, but he's written one since, and so I'm going to read it for him. This is his second nomination, cheeky chap. Winter reads, the space between wind gusts. Winter reads, the space between wind gusts. Jacek Margolak. And Lee says, this is a winter monoku, given that winter is the opening word. The front-loading of the Kigo is important because we would come away with a much different response if there were no explicit Kigo. Oh, Lee, a man after my own heart. And if there were no explicit Kigo, we might instead imagine a warm spring day. Within the context of winter's ambience, my mind immediately focuses on the end phrase, wind gusts. There's a storm, or at the very least a weather system bringing the gusts that shuffle the spaces between the reeds as they sway and bend. A gust is defined as a sudden strong blast of wind, implying a logical and inevitable lull between each blast. This elegant poem has a rhythm to it, as the wind spikes, then decreases, and then spikes again, all in an unpredictable cycle. This lack of smoothness and lack of predictability implies a mood of angst and uncertainty, offset by periods of resilience. The poem places the phrase, the space between, literally between its opening and its ending. Winter reads, the space between wind gusts. Since wind moves horizontally, Margolak's choice here is to use the monoku form, and it's an excellent fit of form and content. The reference to an in-between space is important, as the poem draws our attention, despite harsh weather on one end of the poem, those winter reeds, and wind gusts on the other end, to that very space, the space between. Mention of the space comes at the centre of the poem. The lull between gusts allows the reeds to settle back into some form of straightness or alignment. And it is this lull that draws the poet's attention and ours. There's also a parallel between the reeds in a lull straightening themselves out as opposed to being bent down during a gust. Both in nature and in our society, there are instances when we feel besieged by forces outside our control, yet find pockets of relief and the chance to regroup and re-engage in the space that inevitably arrives between gusts. Well, thank you, Lee. Another very interesting choice. Child holds a red leaf, the suchness. Child holds a red leaf, the suchness. Nina Singh. Nettles reclaiming the shortcut. Nettles reclaiming the shortcut. C.X. Turner. Oh, you know what? We've been plagued by nettles round here in the last couple of years. Don't know what's going on. Don't know how they got there. They're a new phenomenon. But of course, if they're not dealt with, they'll seed, and they seem to self-seed terribly well. Trying to get a word in. Pine needles. Trying to get a word in. Pine needles. Jamie Wimberley. Rice fields, the colour of matcha rain. Rice fields, the colour of matcha rain. Sarah Winteridge. A fountain, reaching through raindrops, we part. A fountain, reaching through raindrops, we part. Robert Whitmer. Summer heat, the empty birdhouse. Summer heat, the empty birdhouse. Anna Yin. Just as the gazelle sneezes, golden dust. Just as the gazelle sneezes, golden dust. Nitu Yamnam. This need to build pillow forts. Natsukashi. This need to build pillow forts. Natsukashi. Pega Ramati Nezhad. Otaku. Always the same nerd. Otaku. Always the same nerd. Deborah Carl Brandt. Giving colour to the rain, bluebell field. Giving colour to the rain, bluebell field. Laurie Kiefer. First graze in the sink, fallen bamboo leaves. First graze in the sink, fallen bamboo leaves. Martina Macievek. Crickets chirp, mingling with deep sleep dreams. Crickets chirp, mingling with deep sleep dreams. Rob McKinnon. As I said, I had a lot of help with this podcast, and from time to time I'm going to give you some input from Lev Hart, one of the editing team. Clive and I already talked about John Green's poem reminding Lev of the legend of Sisyphus. But he's given us some other thoughts on other one-liners in the podcast. And he says some of the best one-liners in this selection distinguish themselves through the use of a pivot. Our love song, over and over, autumn rain. Our love song, over and over, autumn rain. Lorraine Haig. And this one-liner pivots from our love song over and over to over and over, autumn rain. The pivot facilitates ambiguity. Is the love song being played over and over? It would be in my house. Is the autumn rain falling continually? Also a possibility. Or are both true at once? In any case, the pivot gives the monoku a seamless flow from beginning to end. Some continuity. The pivot also takes the reader in the short space of 11 syllables to a destination that seems very different from the point of departure. At first, our love song over and over suggests romance, happiness, perhaps even bliss. The poet appears to be cozying up with her crush. With a pivot, everything changes. In haiku, autumn is the season when friends must part, before winter makes the terrain impassable. The season is associated with loneliness, and now the poet appears to be talking to the loved one in her mind, and perhaps she's playing their song over and over in grief over lost love. And Lev has chosen some other examples, like this one. Fine print, too small to follow, swarming ants. Fine print, too small to follow, swarming ants. Tony Williams. Pivoting from fine print too small to follow, swarming ants, to fine print too small to follow, swarming ants. Inking the veranda, purple sunbird. Inking the veranda purple, sunbird. Rupa Anand. Jasmine tea steeping, my death poem. Jasmine tea, steeping my death poem. Kimberly Kuchar. Love at first sight, impaired. Love at first sight, impaired. Mary Oishi. Spring unfolding, wings of a red-tailed hawk. Spring, unfolding wings of a red-tailed hawk. Rebecca Upjohn. Lace curtain blowing in the wind. Cherry petals. Lace curtain blowing in the wind. Cherry petals. Katie Montagna. If you're enjoying the podcast and you'd like to help keep it going, this is the point where I awkwardly ask for your support. Really doesn't get any easier. Whether it's buying me a coffee, becoming a member, making a PayPal donation, or volunteering a little of your time, every bit of help makes a genuine difference. This particular podcast has reminded me that Poetry Pea has never really been a one-man show. Or one woman, really, I suppose I should say. So many people have generously given their time and expertise. The editing team have listened with fresh ears and caught the things I would undoubtedly have missed. The judging panel devoted hours to reading, discussing and selecting poems with care and thoughtfulness. And then, of course, Lev came along with even more thoughtfulness and thoughtful comments for us. Add to that everyone who submits work, listens, shares episodes, leaves reviews, and encourages fellow poets to join us, and you begin to realise that this little podcast is held together by a remarkable community. So if you're in a position to lend your support in any way, I do thank you terribly much. And if supporting simply means tuning in each week and telling other poetry-loving friends about Poetry Pea, that's wonderful. Every contribution, however it arrives, helps keep this community thriving. So let's get back to some poetry, where I'm much happier. A swing oscillating in the wind, children's laughter. A swing oscillating in the wind, children's laughter. Maria Cristina Pulverenti. Warming the teapot, the calm before the storm. Warming the teapot, the calm before the storm. Jenny Shepherd. Birch trees' shadows falling through light. Birch tree shadows falling through light. Norman Silver. Dim daytime moon, waiting her turn. Dim daytime moon, waiting her turn. Lisa Biller. Scarlet gift from the Japanese maple scrapbook memory. Scarlet gift from the Japanese maple scrapbook memory. Jennifer L. Blank. One swift in the morning, crescent moon. One swift in the morning, crescent moon. Mark Brimble. The gentle simmering of jam, light drizzle. The gentle simmering of jam, light drizzle. Mariangela Kanzi. Almost the end of me, bent water lily. Almost the end of me bent, water lily. Erin Castaldi. Sun, moon, stars, all of the above. Sun, moon, stars, all of the above. Tim Kremen. And next I'd like to feature a few one-liners that Lev has highlighted again, this time as poems in which there appear to be a rupture, inviting the reader to infer a cut or a kiregi. Moonlight swim. We hide nothing. Moonlight swim. We hide nothing. Christopher Seep. A juxtaposition by association appears, linking the concrete image moonlight swim to the narrative statement we hide nothing. Of course, the verse suggests skinny dipping, but perhaps it also implies a shared confidence, a moment of vulnerability, or an expression of candour. The inferred cut, like the pivot, facilitates the ambiguity and provides overall unity. And Lev has pointed out some other possibilities with the inferred cut, suggesting that other verses take the form of a cryptic phrase. But again, that inferred cut creates a juxtaposition, creates ambiguity, and creates overall unity. Cellar below the cellar. My anger, cellar, below the cellar, my anger, Lorinda Lind. And again we have a juxtaposition by association. A concrete image is linked with an expression of emotion, perhaps suggesting unconscious or repressed emotion.
Our next judge is Johnny Moran, who was also the video prompt judge this year in March, I believe. So welcome, Johnny, and thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me, and it's great to participate in these events and spread my knowledge and experience, and I should say learn more and gain more knowledge and experience from the likes of yourselves while you learn at people.
Where I'm always learning when I do these events. As I said, you know, I've already got 2 topics from the good first 2 commentaries, so goodness knows what you're going to throw up. But I just wanted to say another thank you for you doing the video prompt, because, you know, without some people to come along and do the video prompt judging and editing, which is a really popular feature of Poetry Pea, I just couldn't do it. I just don't have the time to do everything, and the video prompt too, so I'm very, very grateful for that. Yep. So, Johnny, you had this poem, you had a poem published in Little Marvels, our anthology last year, and I'm going to ask you to read it, because I think it might just give us a clue as to which of the poems you chose this time. So, Johnny, can you give us a little read of your Little Marvels poem from last year?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Lying close to the abundant verge, a slow badger. Lying close to the abundant verge, a slow badger.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, Johnny, put us out of our misery. What poem did you choose and why?
Yeah, okay. The poem I chose is something similar in a way, and it's a theme I like a lot. So I'll just read it. It's by Patricia, and it's with no name, dead horse, alive with flies. With no name, dead horse, alive with flies. Here we have an arresting description of a quite jarring scene. So I suppose when we confront such an image, you know, our first instinct is to kind of recoil, not to look too closely, and to hurry on and move away from the scene. But I think here the poet doesn't recoil. The poet lingers long enough to interrogate the scene and to notice something. There's actually life happening among this death. I suppose the way I read it there is probably the way that you would kind of read it. But you can also read it, I think, with no name dead, horse alive with flies, or you could read it another way, with no name dead horse, and then dead horse alive with flies. So the dead horse is the hinge between the front piece and the end piece. And I think that's the key to the whole thing. So I suppose we break it down and we say with no name, you know, this suggests an anonymity. No one knows anything about this horse. No one remembers it. It's not commemorated in any way. It's dead, and that's the end of it. So, you know, we have a dead horse, a magnificent animal. It lies dead. That's it. It's final. And, you know, I'm just thinking, I kind of let my imagination go at times, and I'm thinking maybe it's a wild horse and the poet's walking through sorts, you know, a wilderness area and he stumbled across it. Or even it could be something like a casualty of war, because we've a lot of obviously wars going on at the minute, you know, and it could be just another unidentified corpse, for example. And indeed, maybe the human person who cared for it was themselves killed, you know. And I can imagine, you know, perhaps it's a very hot summer day like we're having at the moment. And, you know, the poet's in a quiet glade somewhere and there's a dead horse, and the smell and the buzzing of the flies is probably the only sound that's heard in this quiet little glade, you know. Yeah. So, you know, and the phrase then alive with flies, I suppose while the horse has reached the end of the road, its death provides life to other living organisms. An image of tranquility and finality. You know, a dead body is actually alive with industry. And this is obviously it's the natural cycle of life. And I suppose the reason I chose this poem is that I like haiku that move beyond simple images to show a hint at something deeper and to make us think of something deeper. And I think in this case, the poet has presented an impression of the scene and given the reader space and cues to imagine, you know, what happened, how did we end up here, and what, if anything, will happen next. And I think that the writer has captured the scene and skillfully made it into a bigger picture about life and death and bleakness and hope. And that's my commentary on that poem.
Thank you very much. Yes, again, a lot to think about. I think I agree with you. It speaks to me of sort of the cycle of life, the way it goes around. But Lev, again, came back to me with another idea. And he said, do you think that this poet might be alluding to a very famous popular hit in the 70s? I think it was in the 70s.
Yeah.
A Horse with No Name.
Yeah.
And so that, again, as you pointed out, we already have sort of the different levels of depth in the poem, but that gives it just another little axis to think about, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking about that song recently, and it did strike me a little bit. And that song, yeah. So I was for some reason it came up, and I listened back to it, and I looked at it. There is some kind of haiku type images in that song.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? And it's interesting that the writer, I think, was actually English, possibly, or he had lived in England. And he said, it's so good to be out of the rain. He may have written it in England, I don't know, but he was certainly alluding to English rain. I think he might have even lived in London when he wrote that. It's so good to be out of the rain. Yeah, so that's a good song, you know. Anyway, yeah, it is an image, or it is an allusion to that song, I guess. But I mean, I'm sure the poet's seen the horse somewhere and wondered, and that's what it's about, isn't it? We see things, and we either capture the impression of the scene, and we just give it to the reader to make out what they can. Like, what I said is, well, was it a war, for example? Was the horse?
Yes.
You know, like if you remember the movie 1917, I don't know if you remember that movie, and where the lad says, go over the trench and basically turn left at the horse, kind of thing. There's a dead horse. He says something along those lines. So there is a dead horse in the middle, and it's used as a marker, and it's become familiar and all. So that kind of came to my mind as well when I read about this, you know. And I mean, you know, it's sad as well. Like, a horse is a magnificent animal, you know, and then you see it lying dead, helpless, and it's been feasted on by, you could sort of say, inferior animals, if you like, by flies. But it's we're all equal, eh? We're all part of the whole thing, you know.
I have to say, when I read it first, it was a casualty of war where I went first.
Yeah.
That's where my brain took me. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Johnny. Lovely commentary on that one.
Little sun uncrushed by the cow buttercup. Little sun uncrushed by the cow buttercup. Tracy Davidson. Retreating into self, dead spider. Retreating into self, dead spider. Melissa Dennison. Pond water bubbles, out slips a toad's croak. Pond water bubbles, out slips a toad's croak. Joan C. Fingon. Dew on the hedgerow, rippling house sparrows. Dew on the hedgerow, rippling house sparrows. Mark Forrester. A glass of red, the stains across my heart. A glass of red, the stains across my heart. Denisa Hansutova. Honeysuckle, leading me along. Honeysuckle, leading me along. John Hare. Silencing the city, strawberry moon. Silencing the city, strawberry moon. Maeve O'Sullivan. Strawberry net, the weight of the blackbird. Strawberry net, the weight of the blackbird. Florence Hayhoe. Hiking into ribbons of blue and white. Headland. Hiking into ribbons of blue and white headland. Louise Hopewell. Lip balm. I fall in love with the saffron blooms. Lip balm I fall in love with. The saffron blooms. Lakshmi Iyer. The mountains at my shoulder, big brothers. The mountains at my shoulder, big brothers. Celia Jenkins. Hanami, the stranger and I. Hanami, the stranger and I. Deborah Carl Brandt. Climbing the valley, babbling between waterfalls. Climbing the valley, babbling between waterfalls. Mark Gilbert. An uneventful day, but then. Young daughters. An uneventful day, but then. Young daughters. Arvinder Kaur. And now a little bit more from Lev. And he says, in different ways, two verses in our collection take advantage of the one-line's unique format. The first one-liner takes advantage of the speed with which a one-line poem can be read. Have a listen. Sunset train, the rush into darkness. Sunset train, the rush into darkness. Rohan Boutel. And it's not just read with a rush, but there's a certain clickety-clack rhythm to it, isn't there? Sunset train, the rush into darkness. Lev says, a one-liner takes less time to read than a three-line haiku. Not sure I agree totally. There might be a few that would be contrary to that idea. Because, he says, the eye does not have to slow down as it rounds the line endings, and a one-line is usually briefer than the three. In this poem that we've just heard, Sunset Train, the speed with which its mere 9 syllables can be read mirrors the rush of the train. But in the next haiku, the words following each other consecutively, oh, Lev, I can't say that today, consecutively, got it, on a white page, mirror the cars of a train crossing snowy terrain. Winter train, all day prairie and big sky. Winter train, all day prairie and big sky. Richard Tice.
Our last judge today is David Green. Welcome, David.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here, and I just want to say you and Poetry Pea have played such a big role in my haiku journey. I suppose I could be considered a newbie, as I've been only doing this for 3.5 years, which compared to others is no time at all. And just trying to figure out this wonderful art form, you have been essential. So thank you for that.
Thank you. David, now you and I hopefully are going to get our act into gear. Well, that's unfair. I hopefully will get my act into gear, and we're going to do a joint project with an organisation that you're heavily involved with Confluence. And I thought, as you're here, do you want to sort of semi-kick us off and tell us a little bit about Confluence?
Sure, I'd love to. Confluence Haiku Journal is both. It's a journal and it's also a community, much like Poetry Pea is. We are finishing up our second year in existence. The way Confluence works is every year there are a group of fellows who apply and are selected. And our journal online, each issue features the work of a single poet, along with bio and essay by the poet, but more importantly, commentary from the other fellows. And last year, I was lucky enough to be a fellow in the first cohort. This year, I'm now an associate editor helping with the journal. And a few goals of Confluence are to do innovative work, and in addition to traditional Japanese short form, pushing the boundaries a bit, also giving voice to poets who are newer at it, or voices that we've not heard as often. And I think my favorite part is it's trying to build a community around the globe. We have this year's cohort, the fellows come from, I think, maybe six different countries, three continents, which is thrilling. And it's just trying to build community among not only the haiku community, but also figuring out ways to bring haiku and Japanese short form to the non-haiku community. And we do that in lots of different ways.
That's brilliant. And I think you've got a project coming up very soon, haven't you?
Yeah, timing. So the end of July, which I think, listeners, it's the end of July now. We are doing a community international postcard project. The very simple description is anybody who is interested can, on the Confluence website, which is confluencehaiku.com, is you share your information and we will send you the mailing address of somebody else in the world, and the two of you will simply write and send and trade postcards with one another, featuring a Japanese short form poem of your choice, one that you wrote yourself, but also you don't need to be a poet. It's one that you happen to like. And that's in the simplest form, that's the goal. And I just imagine, I hope, during summertime up in my hemisphere, or wintertime for others, just I mentioned postcards crisscrossing the globe and connecting poets and poetry lovers together.
Yeah, I said to you, I often get poetry sent to me on postcards. I love it. I absolutely love it. There's nothing better. So
Yes.
I'll make sure that website is in the show notes so people can sign up and get involved. I hope
Wonderful.
people do it. It's lovely. It's a lovely thing to do. So David, I know you've been reading a lot of haiku because you've had your Confluence work to do, and you very, very kindly agreed to do this for me. So tell us, which of our poems did you choose?
Right. The poem I've chosen, it's by Biswajit Mishra, and I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly or close to. I looked up the pronunciation. The poem I absolutely loved. It is this: free of verbs, a meadow lark. Free of verbs, a meadow lark. And this is what I wrote about it. In Mishra's poem, Free of Verbs, a Meadow Lark, the opening phrase, free of verbs, tickled my brain immediately as I tried to understand what it meant intellectually and emotionally. The phrase provides so much space for a reader to contemplate what in the world to be free of verbs could mean and what it might be. One description of haiku I find helpful is that they are a slice of a story, that they should allow a reader to create the before and after of that story. And while being free of verbs is a cerebral notion, Mishra's poem invites a reader to make up a story about how one does that. My story begins with the shoulds, the daily monologue telling us what we should be doing and often are not. How well one can be present or in the moment if not bound by these particular verbs. What might one do with this freedom? Mishra provides an answer in the second part of the poem, free of verbs, meadow, lark. By splitting the compound word meadowlark into two separate words, meadow and lark, Mishra creates multiple possibilities, all of which expand upon and deepen the poem's opening phrase. Meadowlark, the bird, their song I've seen described online as both flute-like and buoyant. Meadow, how lovely to be surrounded by tall grass and wildflowers. What responsibility does one have in a meadow? None, I imagine, save for just being in the meadow. Lark adds so much to this poem in many different ways. The bird, of course, in this poem, literally a lark in a meadow. As a noun, a fun, lighthearted activity, something done on a whim, the opposite of a should. As a verb, to lark about, meaning to play or frolic. As an idiom, happy as a lark, to be cheerful and carefree. Lastly, a meadow space lark, having a lark in a meadow. A moment of carefree fun in a meadow, and in that moment, leaving all else aside. In just 6 words, Mishra's poem manages to create a moment, a picture, an idea, a story, and a feeling. Well done.
– Thanks, David. Do you know, I hadn't spotted that split compound. It hadn't occurred to me until I read your commentary. And you're right, I think it just opens the possibilities of this poem just so widely, doesn't it?
Yes, it jumped out at me just because in addition to trying to figure out haiku, I suppose traditionally, I am such a big fan of wordplay and experimenting with haiku. So that break jumped out at me immediately. And I think in such tiny poems, it's a way to make each individual word or phrase do so much more by creating those multiplicities in such a tiny vessel.
Yes. I recently then did a podcast about Anne McKay, and that was one of her particular skills, if you like, was the wordplay in her poetry. She just wrote some excellent stuff. Anyway, thank you very much, David, for that. And thank you to all the judges who gave up their time today to bring us their nominations. And of course, if you fancy being one of the Poetry Pea judges, do let me know. I'm always on the lookout for people to come and tell us about their choices. Today, I think we can all agree that our lovely judges have done a stellar job, and it's going to be difficult to choose which will be the editor's choice. I hope we don't come to blows. So we're going to start debating, and we're going to do it off air, as it were, and you will find out which of these poems becomes the editor's choice and which the honourable mention in the next Poetry Pea journal. Make sure you're on the mailing list so you get notified when it's out. Thanks, chaps.
The judges and I have done our stuff, and this time around, we've decided to do things a little bit differently. Instead of 1 judge's choice and 4 honourable mentions, you'll see in the next journal that there are 2 judges' choices and 3 honourable mentions. We had a real job splitting the judge's choice, even with me having the final say. So that seemed to be the fairest thing to do. Before I go, I'd like to thank everyone who helped me bring this podcast together, the editing team, the judging panel, Lev for his insightful commentary, and of course, every single poet who submitted their work. A great many people gave their time, care and expertise to make this episode possible, and I'm enormously grateful to all of them. Do join me again next week for more scrumptious poetry. Until then, keep writing. And if you're not already signed up to the Poetry Pea newsletter, do pop your name on the list. Those who get the newsletter get the early bird discount whenever we have something special to offer. So, it's well worth joining us. Until next time, ciao!